That's something that you've been saying for years and years and years. I'm looking at a tweet from 2013. Anybody who believes the United States can never be a tyrannical state has their heads in the sand.
First of all, Renee Good arguably tried to run over an ICE officer with her car. So
kicking somebody's car is not justification.
I would have loved to talk to you about that tonight, but you wouldn't let me get to the point. So Bryan Tyler Cohen, it's great to have you. Thank you for coming on the show. Next time, hopefully, we can have a cordial back and forth instead of talking over each other. Thank you very much.
Pause for a second, because this is one of those moments where the confidence comes first and the facts come second. In this exchange, Katie Pavlich steps in with what's clearly designed to be a trap for Bryan Tyler Cohen. The tone signals it. The structure of the question signals it. It's framed as if the conclusion is already settled, as if all that's left is for him to stumble into it. But watch what happens when the response isn't emotional. It isn't evasive, it's statistical. He answers with documented data, a measurable fact that directly challenges the premise of the question. And when that number enters the conversation, the dynamic changes immediately. Because now it's no longer about tone or posture. It's about whether the underlying claim can survive contact with evidence. This is the part that matters. The attempt wasn't just disagreement, it was an effort to corner someone publicly. And when the foundation of that attempt doesn't hold, the confidence behind it starts to thin out. You can almost feel the recalibration in real time. So instead of jumping ahead, let's actually watch how this unfolds from beginning to end. I'll save my full reaction for after, because the shift only really lands once you see it play out without interruption.
Joining me now is Bryan Tyler Cohen, progressive YouTuber. Bryan, great to see you again. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Do you think that the dancing is really a productive way to get reforms of ICE that the left is calling for?
I think everybody should speak out in the way that they can be most effective. And so if dancers want to dance, then good on them. If there are students who want to walk out, good on them. If there are legislators who want to actually do something, good on them. We can all do our part. And I don't think that we should be, saving smoke for people who are trying to, offer up what little they can to draw attention to this, when there are other people who are just basically apologizing for ICE's overreach.
I mean, I do agree. I mean, I'm glad that they're not screaming and interrupting federal investigations
or shooting people in the face, for example. Or
operations where ICE agents are trying to go in and remove pedophiles and rapists and murderers from communities, blowing whistles in their ears. I agree. I'm glad that dancing is a better form of peaceful protest. But last week, we saw an unprovoked attack on a mother in an unpeaceful protest, leaving her covered in bruises. She was outside of a school and attacked by kids who were not in school. Why is the left radicalizing these students to not only leave school, where the country has a 54% rate of not being able to read, in order to go out and then attack people who are just asking them to calm down?
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree that literacy scores in this country are pretty dismal. And in fact, the lowest literacy scores in this country are in red states run by Republican governors and Republican legislatures. So I definitely think that's a big problem to consider. I mean, if you look at places like Oklahoma, for example, if you look at places like Arkansas, I mean, these are, Mississippi, Louisiana, these have the lowest test scores in the country. But that, I'm assuming that's not what you want to speak about.
I'd be happy to talk about Mississippi. It's actually much better than the majority of the blue states in this country in terms of education. It's actually a great story about education, but that's not about ICE, which is what we're talking about now.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't think you really want to have an argument about the test scores in red states versus blue states. But
I'd be happy to have you back to have that conversation. But I don't think kids should be leaving school to go and protest ICE when they can't read, write, or do arithmetic.
Look, I think that we have a very important First Amendment right in this country. And if kids want to use what platform they have to step out of school to protest the overreach of a tyrannical government and a lawless rogue agency, then I support their ability to do that. Again, look, you're going to find individuals who are going to be violent, and you're never going to see me defend anybody who brings violence into the situation. So I'm not going to defend that. And certainly, there are people everywhere who are going to resort to violence, and I think you and I can both agree that that's not acceptable.
I would agree,
regardless of where it happens.
Yeah.
But if in terms of kids walking out of school, I'm completely I think civics in this country is obviously very important, and if kids are going to be paying attention to politics, paying attention to what's happening in their country, I think that more power to them if they can walk out. I think if athletes at the Olympics have something to say and use that platform, more power to them. The more people that can speak up. I mean, I am not of this mind that had gained a lot of traction in Republican circles, where athletes are just supposed to shut up and dribble. We have a long, proud history in this country of people like athletes, for example, standing up at the Olympics, going back decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, well, it's good that they live in a country where they have those rights. That is true. It's good to live in a country where they have those rights.
And I think one of the most important rights is not to succumb to a tyrannical government. And in fact, that's something that you've been saying for years and years and years. I'm looking at a tweet from 2013. Anybody who believes the United States can never be a tyrannical state has their heads in the sand. So that issue used to be important to you, and yet now you have a rogue agency killing people with impunity. We're not going to see any justice for Renee Good.
We gotta take a second and take a step back. Okay, first of all, Renee Good arguably tried to run over an ICE officer with her car. So you say that you're not for violence. There's lots of video showing that
we almost ran him over. We know what it looks like when somebody turns the steering wheel to the right.
In terms of the issue of tyranny, you brought this up last time you were on the show, so I'm happy to bring it up again.
What about Alex Preddy?
Well, there's Alex Preddy was at a protest 2 weeks prior, ICE, and got violent with the officers, kicked out a tailgate, then went to another one. But let's get back to the point.
So kicking a tailgate 11 days prior is justification to kill somebody?
Okay, there's an ongoing investigation. The point is, if law enforcement would have done its job by arresting him and enforcing the law, he wouldn't have been at the second protest where he was trying to get in the middle of a federal investigation, which is a bad idea.
Camera and he was approached by ICE.
Not to mention that officials, including the lieutenant governor in Minnesota, were telling people to go out and put their bodies on the line to commit felonies by getting in the middle of federal investigations, which is a terrible idea.
By ICE agents. We all saw the video of Alex Preddy being approached by ICE agents. We also saw the video
of him weeks prior agitating and getting violent with ICE agents, which you just said that you're against violence.
Kicking somebody's car is not justification to be murdered.
Getting involved in the middle of a federal investigation is a felony, okay?
Do you think kicking someone's car is adequate justification?
Democrats telling children to leave school when they cannot read or do math, which is going to be detrimental for their future, telling them to leave school to go protest ICE with no end in sight, and telling people to put their bodies on the line, as they did with Renee Good and Alex Preddy, is not a good way to change things in Washington. The way you do that is by coming to D.C. and talking about the differences and what they want to change. I would have loved to talk to you about that tonight, but you wouldn't let me get to the point. So Bryan Tyler Cohen, it's great to have you. Thank you for coming on the show. Next time, hopefully we can have a cordial back and forth instead of talking over each other. Thank you very much.
Let's just say it plainly, that ending wasn't accidental. It was reactive. The moment the interview wrapped abruptly, you could feel why. This wasn't a scheduling issue. It wasn't a natural conclusion. It was what happens when a talking point collides with documented reality on live television. And once Bryan Tyler Cohen introduced hard numbers into the exchange, the energy shifted in a way that couldn't be reversed. Here's the part that matters. When the discussion turned to education rankings, the claim on the table simply didn't survive scrutiny. The data on state education performance is publicly available. States such as Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma consistently rank near the bottom in national education metrics. Those are measurable outcomes, not partisan spin, measurable outcomes. And many of those states are governed by Republican leadership. That correlation may invite debate about causation, but the rankings themselves are not in dispute. So when Katie Pavlich attempted to push back against that framing, the problem wasn't tone, it was evidence. Once the statistics were clearly stated, the debate stopped being rhetorical. It became empirical. And when a media strategy is built on confident framing rather than documented proof, that's usually the breaking point. Look at the sequence. From the second the numbers were cited, the posture changed. There was no sustained counterargument, no competing data set, no reframing supported by evidence. Instead, the interview concluded abruptly. We've seen this pattern before. When political figures aligned with the MAGA wing are challenged by interviews who come prepared, whether in the United States or abroad, the shift is familiar. Strong posture at the start, discomfort once specifics enter the conversation, then deflection or disengagement. It's not universal, but it's frequent enough to notice. And here's the broader issue, the so what that actually affects people at home. Education outcomes aren't abstract talking points. They connect directly to economic mobility, workforce development, healthcare literacy, and long-term community stability. When data shows persistent underperformance in certain states, that's not a partisan attack. That's a policy conversation waiting to happen. If leaders want to argue that governance models are superior, then the outcomes should be able to withstand scrutiny. That's how accountability works in a democracy. This is also about credibility. In the digital age, public records exist. Voting histories exist. Public statements exist. When narratives shift depending on the audience, there is almost always a trail, and voters are increasingly aware of that. Consistency matters. Evidence matters. Institutional integrity matters. What stood out here wasn't volume or theatrics. It was preparation. Cohen came equipped with documented rankings. And once those figures were stated clearly, the attempt to corner him lost traction. That's not spectacle. That's what happens when debate is grounded in verifiable information. So here's the question for you. When interviews end the moment data enters the conversation, what does that say about confidence in the argument? Is this media strategy still persuasive to voters, or are people starting to demand something sturdier than posture? That's the kind of exchange we break down here on Inside Information, not just who won, but what the moment reveals about accountability, governance, and the health of democratic discourse. If you value evidence-based analysis and direct conversations about political power, consider subscribing and turning on notifications. And let me know in the comments, do moments like this change minds, or are audiences already locked into their corners? Democracy depends on informed citizens. The question is whether our political media ecosystem is ready for that standard.